Chapter 1. The Neon Pulse. Part 4. The Savannah sky was a bruised, pulsating canvas of arterial red, churned into a vortex by the relentless ion storms that had gripped the Georgia lowcountry for months. The city, once known for its historic squares and Spanish moss, was now a jagged landscape of rusted iron, shattered glass, and the hum of a dying world. On the ragged periphery of the city, where the marshlands met the industrial sprawl, stood the monolith that defined their current existence, the primary broadcast tower of WNCX-86. It was a skeleton of steel, leaning precariously against the crushing pressure of the atmosphere. To the world, it was an eyesore. To Signal Rot, it was the gateway to the only thing left worth having, the signal. Vane, the frontman of Signal Rot, stood perched on a crossbeam 200 feet above the scorched earth. His hands were raw, gripped tightly around a live transmission cable that fed directly into the heart of the tower's main array. His face was partially obscured by a rusted respirator, his eyes darting toward the horizon where the neon-red storm swirled like an open wound. He could feel the tower vibrating beneath his boots, not from the wind, but from the raw, unfiltered data surging through the steel. "The interference is peaking," Vane shouted, his voice barely audible over the mechanical screeching of the tower. Below him, hanging like a spider in its web, was Rift. She was tethered by a thick, frayed cord, her body swaying in the gale. Her fingers, calloused and stained with oil, danced across a portable interface clamped to the beam. She was the voice, the bridge between the analog soul of the band and the digital nightmare they were trying to overwrite. "I'm pushing the gain," Rift screamed back, her own voice distorted by the localized electromagnetic field. "If I go any higher, the preamps are going to blow, Vane. We're fighting the resistance of the whole damn grid." At the base of the tower, the technical operation was underway, a chaotic display of desperate innovation. The tech specialist, a man whose identity was buried under layers of grease and shadows, sat at a salvaged workstation. He was the one managing the final, impossible task, breaking the encryption of the WNCX-86 signal and forcing the Signal Rot transmission into the stream. His fingers were a blur of motion across the keys of a laptop, screens surrounding him flickering with lines of code that defied the logic of the old world. He had spliced the tower's feed with raw, jagged grunge audio, turning the broadcast into a weapon of sonic distortion. "I'm in," the specialist yelled, his voice cracking. "I've bypassed the main gate. It's all yours, Vane." Up on the structure, the band members, the guitarist, the bassist, Sludge, and the drummer, Anode, began their performance, physically wired into the tower's core. They weren't just playing, they were conduits. The air around them began to crackle with jagged red electrical arcs, a physical manifestation of the signal they were forcing into the airwaves. Sludge's bass riff was a subterranean rumble that made the entire tower shudder, a sound that felt like the earth itself cracking open. Anode's drumming wasn't just percussion, it was a rhythmic bombardment, keeping the syncopation of the broadcast locked onto the target frequency. "Now," Vane roared, his voice catching the distorted wave and amplifying it tenfold. Rift joined him, her voice a shrill, piercing lament that cut through the storm, echoing across the ruins of Savannah. For a moment, the neon-red tornado above them seemed to pause, caught in the wake of their collective scream. The signal hit, a crushing wave of high-fidelity distortion that hit every receiver in the city. In their bunker, Wanky and Wonky were waiting. They heard the shift, the moment the Signal Rot frequency slammed into the established feed. "They're hitting the tower," Wonky whispered, her eyes wide as she gripped her Nuka-Cola bottle, the blue glow reflecting in her gaze. "Can you hear it, Wanky? It sounds like glass shattering." Wanky, still sitting on the couch with his pipe, took a deep breath, his red-tinted fingers tapping against his knee in anticipation. "Yeah, I hear it. They're making their play." He stood up, the smoke swirling around him like a shroud. He walked over to the intercom system on the wall, his hand resting on the transmit toggle. "Roxy," he said, his voice cold and steady. "The board is yours. If they want to fight for the signal, let's show them the true depth of our frequency. Start the feedback loop." Across the bunker, Roxy Ripper, still hunched over her console, cracked a smile. She pushed the gain into the red, feeling the equipment groan under the pressure. Initiating the override, she murmured, her hands flying across the board. The war for Savannah's airwaves had entered its final, most violent phase. Outside, the tower stood firm, a lightning rod for a civilization that refused to stay silent, even as the sky itself began to bleed into the earth. The broadcast was live, the signal was raw, and the wasteland was finally, terrifyingly, listening.